Welcome everyone to our first episode of Proof of DeSci by ValleyDAO. And today's space is called From Lab to Textile, Hempy's Breakthrough and the Case for DeSci. And we're here to spotlight real research funded through decentralized science because DeSci isn't really just a theory, it's delivering real-world impact, and we're here to prove it. And today we're going to be diving into Hempy's latest research milestone, discuss how DeSci made it possible. And please welcome Filippo, the lead scientist at Hempy Project. We've got Ella, science communications lead from Molecule. We've got Albert, who's responsible for science at ValleyDAO. We've got Morgan, who's also responsible for product side at ValleyDAO. And I'm your host, I'm Tom, the marketing guy at ValleyDAO. So just before we go into dive into DeSci in action side, so we're going to be discussing Hempy and Hempy's recent milestone. Maybe Albert or Morgan, could you give a quick recap of ValleyDAO, intro people to ValleyDAO, what do we do, how we make DeSci possible?
I'll have a stab at it. So ValleyDAO was a DeSci collective aimed at funding research in the field of climate biotechnology. So we are to date the only climate focused project in DeSci. We fund everything from such as hemp textiles, for example, so enzymes making hemp textiles more softer, to research focusing on creating cocoa fats in the lab so that we don't have to ship them halfway across the world. We focus on projects that are decreasing forever chemicals in a wide range of different products. And part of our new strategy on a more recent time frame is developing tools for academics to much more quickly commercialize their research. Maybe something that Morgan can quickly touch on.
Yeah. So we are building a wonderful platform that we're very excited to share with everybody. And I think the key pillars are really how do we make the money that goes to funding research go further? So everything from follow-on fundraising for projects that either we fund or that we like and we want to support, and then the technology development. So how do you actually develop a technology to solve a problem in climate, specifically climate biotech? And then finally, on the business development side, how do you turn a research project into a functional business and something that a VC can throw money at? I mean, these are all super hard problems to solve. We are just one group of people scratching the surface at this, but we believe that through the power of community, through the collective experience that we all share, we can actually have a pretty good shot at it. So we're building a platform to support this, and you can expect to see many updates from us in the coming months with some teasers, some demos, and hopefully you guys will be able to try it out. And for anyone that's coming to DeSci London in the next few weeks, we will be doing a demo there, including a workshop. So that will be the first kind of big reveal.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for this quick intro into ValleyDAO. So as a side note as well, we'd love to thank you guys for 10,000 followers on X. Make sure if you don't follow us or if you just listen to the recorded episode of Proof of DeSci, please make sure to go onto X and give us a follow. Give a follow to Ella, to Molecule, to Hempy, of course, and Albert Morgan, our fantastic speakers here as well. Okay, let's dive in to Hempy. So Filippo, can you tell us briefly about Hempy and the research focus? Can you just introduce this to the wider public?
Yeah, sure. The Hempy project is basically based on the use of enzymes to perform the treatment of hemp's fibers, therefore to obtain better properties from the fibers and make them suitable for the textile industry itself. Just quickly, enzymes are natural biocatalysts that we can have from the nature, and they actually have advantages that allow us to specifically modify the substrate that we want, in this case the components of hemp. So we can specifically and selectively going to modify what of the hemp believe could be removed or modified in order to obtain better properties. So we are trying to do this using enzymes because they present many advantages compared to the chemical treatment. And we believe that hemp could be, since is a quite environmental friendly fiber, could be a very good alternative compared to other fibers that are now present in the textile industry. The research, I'm actually part of the biomaterial and enzyme technology group. So in particular, in acid and Boku, we have many different enzymes available to perform this task. And we do believe that finding the right combination of biocatalysts, we can actually find the sweet spot of the properties that you have to modify to hemp in order to achieve this goal.
Filippo, thank you for the intro to Hempy. Can you tell us a little bit more about why was it actually hemp that was chosen as the target material? And I know obviously the answer, but I feel like people that are listening to us may be wondering, because it's still kind of I feel like a top secret material that not a lot of people are discussing. And can you break also down the recent breakthrough? What exactly did the enzyme treatment achieve to date?
Yeah, sure. Well, I will say that hemp was chosen because of the growing interest from the society towards kind of bio-based material, but also eco-friendly material, and the awareness that the society is having towards this kind of material, specifically in this case in the textile industry. But to talk about this, we just have to think about the fact that 50% of the global fiber production nowadays is still polyesters, which are oil-based textile, but also polyamides, for example. And the the other bio-based fiber that we have available in the market is cotton, which covers more or less 25% of the market. But cotton is a seed fiber which requires a lot of water to grow, a lot of pesticide in order to get the cotton itself, and this could lead to water contamination and also some significant environmental concerns. On the other side, we have natural lignocellulosic fibers, the so-called bast fibers or stem fibers, such as hemp, for example, that are an alternative to these because they are actually obtained from the stem of the plant, so are not from the seed or from the fruit. And they have some very nice environmental properties, environmental advantages, especially compared to cotton, such as the fact that they don't require that much water to grow. They don't require that much soil in area of soil to grow. And also they can more or less grow pretty much everywhere. Not many people know that actually Europe is one of the first territory in the world for the production of hemp, just to understand how easy it is to grow this material. And therefore, the main problem that we want to solve is the fact that hemp, compared to cotton, for example, is very stiff and hard. So it's not that easy to process and it's not that easy to be used from the textile industry. Therefore, what we're going to target with this enzymatic modification is exactly this, to modify the components of hemp to obtain better properties so that is more suitable for the textile industry. And therefore, we hopefully will be able to debottleneck this issue and make the fiber more soft.
Amazing. So basically, it's better for the environment. It's better for humans to wear. It's better even economically because it doesn't really get destroyed that easily as cotton clothing, for example. That's brilliant. Filippo, and the second part of the question was if you could break down the recent breakthrough in a Hempy research project.
The project has been starting from the 1st of February. So we have been working in the lab for the past 2 months. I can say that from the scientific point of view, we already obtained some results. I think in the Hempy profile was shared actually that by eye it's possible to see that the fiber after some specific enzymatic treatment got brighter. And this usually is a symptom of the fact that lignin, so the component of the fiber that gives this hardness and this stiffness was removed. But of course, we have to carry out more analysis to consolidate the results and being able to say that is exactly that. But I can say that these are definitely very promising results and that, especially for being started only for a couple of weeks, the project is very, very promising.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. It's great to see that early into the research to see the results. Albert, Morgan, do you have anything do you like to add? Because obviously you've been working on Hempy with Filippo from the beginning.
Well, what I would love to say is, I think, Filippo and Professor Georg has just been at it from day zero and managed to get the lab work started super fast and already managed to ship results in under 2 months, which makes it even more exciting to be involved in this project. And while the research is happening at ACIB in Austria, within the ValleyDAO community, and particularly the research focus group is already now starting to look at basically validating a business case for how we could bring these textiles to market. And one of our core objectives right now is to establish an online shop where people can buy hemp cotton blended clothing, because these clothing, they're already on the market. The issue with them is that they're, a bit more expensive than usual. And they're composed of 50% cotton. And so the goal with the Hempy project is to push it towards, let's say 30% cotton or 20% cotton or maybe 100% 20% cotton, or maybe 0% cotton, so that they're made purely out of hemp. But while we work towards getting there, we're thinking of already, selling hemp clothing that can be worn and that are comfortable to do. And of course, they're going to be Hempy branded. And we're doing this to essentially gather, data from the market. So gather data on such as if people demand these clothing, what the buyer potential is, for example, and already now starting to just establish a distribution channel so that when we have the actual hempy clothing, we can start distributing immediately to different users.
Absolutely. Thank you, Albert, for this input. We also have Dan on stage. Hey, Dan, how's it going? Dan's from the ValleyDAO team as well, and he has been involved in working on the Hempy Project side as well. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Hey guys, great chat so far. I just wanted to kind of expand on what Albert was saying. Like, we talked about how this project has like a really strong scientific foundation, and Filippo and his team are already shipping results, and that's, I think, something that on its own stands out in DeSci, something that's community funded, and we're already seeing research results. But the other side that's super exciting is that, this is a consumer product that can be delivered to people who want it at a relatively short time frame. And, I'm not super deep into like Pudgy Penguins and some of the other consumer facing crypto projects that also have like in real life products. I know there's massive potential and like energy from our community and reach. And I think that there's like all sorts of things that we can combine in really exciting and novel ways to, get science into the hands of people in the form of products that make their lives better. So this is just like a great, first chapter in this exciting story. And I'm like really happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Filippo, yeah, because what Dan was actually saying, you're already shipping the results, which is absolutely amazing. And I know you are diving into the unknown with the research. But can you tell us a little bit more? What can we expect in the coming months? Is there anything you can say what you're going to be working on currently, the next phase?
Yeah, sure. So currently my focus and my expertise is about enzymes, and not to go too much into the details, but the hemp fibers are composed of, we already mentioned lignin, that is what is giving the stiffness to the fiber itself, but also many other components such as cellulose, hemicellulose, pectin, xylan, and so on. It's actually a quite complex material, but the very nice thing is that with enzyme we can specifically go into modify one of these components, and therefore I'm testing out in the lab many different families of enzyme that we have available in our facility that we have been using through the years, and we think could be actually delivering great results in this regard. So this is what I'm currently doing right now, trying out different enzymes directly on the material. So this is also something that is quite advanced, I would say, because usually in science you go first to characterize the enzyme itself, maybe towards some other compound, and after months you go towards the material, where here we decided to directly work on the hemp fiber itself. And more or less this is what I'm carrying out right now, and I hope that in the next months I will be able to see not only that the enzyme works, but actually that the properties of the fiber itself, of the hemp fibers, are getting better and are getting closer to the goal.
Guys, this is Hempy. Go and check out Hempy's Twitter profile and give it a follow. Have a look at all the recent posts, because honestly, it's so interesting. And I'm just so proud that here at ValleyDAO, what we do is we're bringing the results. We're bringing in the results for DeSci. We're proving that DeSci actually works. And now moving on into more of a DeSci kind of DeSci as a business model and DeSci as a funding model, more in depth. Filippo, how did working with ValleyDAO and the whole DeSci model shape help to accelerate your research?
Yeah, this is great. Starting from the funding itself is definitely another instrument that a researcher that is looking for a fund can apply to. But specifically for me, that I would say I'm more like working in the science itself, so inside the lab, is actually giving you the idea that there's an entire community behind you that can propose something that you could do or can help you solving the problems. Just to give a quick example, last week I got a message from Albert regarding some analysis that we could do to compare our fibers, our modified hemp fibers, and compare it to other commercial ones based on a message that he received, I think it was on Discord from the community. And this is something that I didn't look before, but actually was a great input. So yeah, this is just a very quick example, but I think actually simply the idea or the security of having so many people behind you, an entire community that can help you or giving you inputs for different stuff is actually something very great that maybe most of the time you don't have actually the traditional academia system or funding system.
Awesome. Morgan, yeah?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think that's something that maybe people don't necessarily think of when they think of DeSci. They think, research funded, okay, we wait for results, research goes good, and then we figure out what the hell we do with it. Or at least this is what's happening in traditional science in most cases, right? But you develop a technology and then you're trying to find product market fit. But what's nice about DeSci and what got me excited about DeSci since the beginning was reversing that model, allowing the business insights to start at the very earliest stage and having this feedback loop between the two. So, the scientific results affect how we go out and think about the business model and the products and how we market the products. But then in the reverse context, the business model is also going to shape how we do the research. Like as Filippo just said, we're starting to think about how we compare these fibers to other fibers on the market and how to make them competitive. So now we know what we're aiming for. We have targets that we can measure against continuously, and we can tweak and improve things. We can design new experiments or go out and survey new enzymes that we know are likely to have the effects that we want on the final product. So it's very much this flywheel at the end of the day between the science and the business. And I think this just gives it much more chance of success because it's more like building a product, whether that's, software or a physical product. It's much more like building a product for the market rather than the other way around, as I said.
Yeah, this is super interesting. And Morgan and Albert, what do you think, if you can give us a little input on the process of fundraising for, especially here in terms of Hempy, what was the experience like? And yeah, do you think there was any kind of challenges scientifically or operationally during this fundraising process?
I mean, Ella is on the call from Molecule. I don't know if you want to say a couple of words about Catalyst as a platform, Molecule, and then I can also add some stuff about the fundraising for Hempy itself.
Yeah, sure. Hey guys. Nice to listen to you guys chat a little bit. I am Ella, I'm Molecule's scientific communications lead. Molecule is an IP protocol that helps scientists get their research funded. We have been knocking around the DeSci space for a while now, and I think have done various iterations of this. Also know ValleyDAO very well. One of our sort of offshoots has been bio, and the ValleyDAO team went through the bio launch pad and that sort of thing. So I think, Albert and Morgan I know well, and it's nice to be on the stage here with them. So Hempy, he went up on Catalyst. Yeah, maybe actually the context, let me rewind a little bit, which is that Molecule launched Catalyst last year. It was a new iteration of our funding protocol, which basically allowed researchers to tokenize their research and fundraise by, selling off those tokens. Those tokens are governance tokens, so what it means is that when someone owns a governance token, they get to participate and guide the research forward. Yeah, I think ValleyDAO brought us HempNet. It went up on Catalyst and it got funded. There was a pretty wild time that happened towards the end of last year, which I think brought a lot of new eyes on DeSci, which was an event that happened at a crypto conference in Bangkok where two of crypto OGs / thought leaders / whatever you want to call them attended a small DeSci event, and I think crypto definitely goes through its hype cycles, and there was this sort of flood of interest, and a whole bunch of projects on Catalyst got funded. It was amazing in the sense that science was being funded, which is always great, but I think it created a lot of new challenges in the sense that I think it was now that we have all this science funded, what are the next steps? How do we create reporting lines? How do we get that data visible? And so I think that's kind of been one of the bigger focuses in the sort of preceding months. But yeah, Albert, would be curious to know what the experience was like from your end, because I think the ValleyDAO team shepherded the HempNet project onto the platform, but we're not the only people funding the project, so they kind of coexist with this sort of group of funders.
Yeah, after the listing, so when the listing process, essentially, project description, what you're going to do with the money, the research milestones, the impact the research is going to drive, etc. After we published that, it was quite a slow process of getting funding towards the project, because this was before the storm that you just explained, and it was a little bit sort of like a little bit of manual work, because we were actively like reaching out to people, pitching it to people, marketing it, similar fashion to when you like would raise for a startup, but on a more like macro scale or miniature scale, if that makes sense. Managed to raise 25 to 30% of the funds, and then when the storm came with like the big influencers, it was CZ from Binance and Vitalik in the same room talking at this event, and it was a DeSci event. 48 to 72 hours after that, the Hempy Project, was fully funded, which was amazing to see. So yeah, and then now the big question is, and which maybe is like part of the future challenge, is can we sustain this funding model? Like how does that type of future look like? Our objective with Hempy is to really demonstrate that we can drive impact perhaps on a shorter time frame that is more compatible with the short time frames in crypto. And if Hempy is a success, hopefully future projects can also fundraise in a similar fashion. But I think it's not only the responsibility of Hempy to sort of pull their weight in this. Like I think all projects that raise through Catalyst for their research projects need to just be way more active than they've been so far.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things for me as well is I think crypto markets are always going to be erratic, and there always are going to be ups and there always are going to be downs. And when you are building with this sort of connection to the real world, you need to figure out a way how to best stabilize yourself so that like you can ride that wave. One of the big things for me is like I don't want DeSci to be like ruled by the highs and the lows. I think there definitely will always be bleed and an impact, but like there needs to be systems put in place that like stabilize DeSci. And I think like one of the interesting things that you guys do, which I think is a really interesting sort of pathway forward, is like the keen look at product and like the direct to consumer product pipeline and all of that sort of thing, which is not possible. I think, as you're saying, like SynBio's definitely a minority in the sort of quite healthcare driven DeSci ecosystem at the moment. Like most of the other DAOs kind of looking at like drugs and that sort of, and there's really not an easy way to sort of do drug discovery and then get that like direct to consumer quite quickly. So I think like ValleyDAO and HempNet is in this really cool, unique spot and occupies its own little niche in the DeSci space that like is not really possible to occupy by other DAOs. So yeah, I always think like ValleyDAO is quite an interesting way of thinking about things and growing through the ecosystem.
Yeah, that's guys, you are actually starting a really interesting discussion. Ella mentioned that crypto market is obviously highly volatile, and we need to find a way to stabilize the DeSci sector within Web3. It is going to be incredibly important. What Albert mentioned, that all DeSci projects need to be put on their weight. They need to communicate well the outputs of the researchers to prove that DeSci actually works. And this is all of our jobs, and everyone here in the community to share the news. Whenever you follow different DAOs, different DeSci projects, different researchers that are also involved in Web3, share the news, guys. Engage with their content. Tell people about it. What I think is incredibly important, and it's completely outside of the investment zone in DeSci, it's the educational aspect of it. Because what we can see, even with Hempy, when people engage with content from Hempy, they are being part of the community. They're being part of a scientific community, whether they like it or not. Maybe sometimes they don't even realize that, that they're part of something that's actually providing real world results and potentially is going to change the world. Is going to change different markets. In this example, obviously, it's the clothing market. But to be at the forefront of DeSci is unique. It's unique for all of us, and we need to take advantage of it. We need to tell people about what's happening in DeSci. Morgan.
Yeah, I actually wanted to say, to put my own spin on that, but you said it very well yourself. I think maybe one thing that I would like to add, or one perspective to think about, is that right now we're in what would feel like to most of us in DeSci, we're in a quiet patch. And if you're new around here and you're coming in, you might think, okay, like there's nothing happening here. But when you really dig in, you get to know that there is a lot happening here behind the scenes, constantly and consistently. And that, of course, the market has these big periods of fluctuation and excitement, and then these rushes down, and everything can feel very emotional, and it feels like, is DeSci dead or whatever, but it hasn't been, right? We've been through these cycles numerous times, ups and downs and everything in between. and we're still here, we're still building, we're still able to fund projects. And if you are here and if you believe in the long-term vision of DeSci, then you know better than anyone that it's not about these, hyper fluctuation market cycles. It's about being here in the long run and being here when things are quiet, because that's the time when you're building. And then when things get crazy again, DeSci is all about everybody, coming up together, being a part of this collective movement and being able to fund science, being able to support it, being able to steer the science. And so if you want to have that kind of impact and you really believe in that vision, as we do, then have to think more long term, and that just is the way it is. And so there's always going to be people that come and go and that are just looking to make a quick buck. In DeSci, of course, there are tokens and there is that incentive for certain demographics, but ultimately that is not what DeSci is about. That's not who we're building for. And so if any of those things I just said align with you, then please come and join the community and be a part of this.
Love this, Morgan. Thank you. And yeah, going back to the fundraising process, actually, I wanted to ask you guys, and I think everyone can chip in and provide their point of view, but what do you see as the biggest difference between DeSci fundraising and traditional research grants?
Well, I know what I want to say here. For me, there's the biggest fundamental difference is that grant funding is grant funding, and DeSci funding is at the end of the day still a business deal. These are contracts that are signed, IP rights are assigned. It's much more in line with the sort of business side of science than I think grant funding, which typically doesn't come with that many sort of requirements on what happens to the IP afterwards, which I think that is, I suppose it's the backbone of Molecule essentially is this IP transferal, or at least tokenization of those governance rights. And I think a lot of people who come in to DeSci often think it's just a crowdfunding with crypto, which it's not, because of these sort of IP rights. So I think that's a common misconception that I come across a lot. So I'm just taking my little soapbox now to clear up that miscommunication or misconception.
Of course. Thank you, Ella. And Albert, Morgan, Dan?
I just spoke a lot, so I'll let someone else.
First, maybe Albert wants to.
I think when researchers fundraise through DeSci, it's a bit more, in my view, more intentional capital, if that's a word, which means that, the researcher is receiving this capital with the expectation that we're going to do something after the research. And this frames the whole situation through a very different lens that is more impact focused, is what I would say. And given, and as Filippo said, this community aspect that is behind the researcher and that continuously supporting the researcher creates, and hope the intention is that it creates a lot of much more motivation for the researcher to really do their absolute best to make things work. And of course, the input from the community can hopefully, steer the direction of the research towards a more impactful outcome, perhaps. We still don't know how these funding models pan out in the long term in contrast to traditional funding. But I think everybody in DeSci wants to prove that DeSci can work. And so a big part of that is really trying to push towards positive results and demonstrate that through the generation of real products, solutions, therapeutics, and so on.
Now, I'll just add to that too, Albert. So, this project, I think it's really cool because it combines three of the most exciting things that are happening in DeSci, but it does it. I think it's the only project that really combines all three of those. So, the first is funding. We've seen a lot of cool things happen in the past year with projects, that have, a certain impact that resonates with people getting funded. It could be, longevity, cryopreservation, climate, whatever. So it checks that box. And then the second thing is that we're funding actual science, shipping results to the community. So the community is involved in seeing the science, interacting with the researchers, and seeing milestones, and even potentially iterating on them as well based on what people are excited about and what people need. So we're already seeing that at month 2. So this is bona fide actual science that's happening, which is the second big box that's checked. And the third one that's really unique is that we're going to be able to leverage our community into basically being early customers and helping us figure out what the market actually wants in terms of consumer products. So unlike a therapeutic that's going to take a really long time to reach market, we could get out hoodies, we can get out samples, and we could build a brand kind of together. around this, and all of the stakeholders are customers. All the customers are stakeholders, and it's kind of like merging those two things. So like it has all the ingredients to be kind of like a hallmark project of DeSci, and kind of like showcase all of the things that are possible. And like I think we're just getting started, but this is like one to watch and one to be really excited about.
Absolutely. Well, I think, what we've learned so far from Web3 and blockchain, obviously blockchain is allowing us to perform, do DeSci, right, in a space. But it's changing so fast and we're adapting. We need to adapt so fast as well. What we've learned so far is basically DeSci in probably next 12 months, 24 months is going to look completely different. Maybe the fundraising process it definitely is going to evolve, right? And we're going to be adapting. We're going to make it much smoother and we're going to make it much easier for both investors, for researchers. And that's the key. We're exploring the unknown right now, which is absolutely incredible for everyone in this space, for everyone in the DeSci space. So I'm all here for it. Absolutely. It's an incredible time for anyone in Web3, for anyone in the real world Web2 science, moving into DeSci. But Filippo, actually, I wanted to ask you this question because the guys here, obviously, they're much more into Web3, and I don't think that you were heavy into blockchain, into crypto, into Web3 prior to launching Hempy as the research project. What do you think was the biggest difference in the fundraising process than in Web3 through ValleyDAO compared to what it looks like in Web2? And is it easier? Is it smoother? Is it faster?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Probably I should ask maybe Professor Gubitz about that, since he was more involved into the bureaucratic steps of it. But from my point of view, is more like, definitely is another tool that a researcher can have to found his research. And as already has been said, I have the feeling that this is more like funding research towards reaching a final product or a final goal that is, I don't want to say the complete opposite than what is usually academic research. But academics is sometimes really static, I would say, and based on, okay, you get this project funded if you're able to write 3-4 publication or whatever. So it's somehow a system based on just writing scientific literature without really developing some real product, for example, some real application that could be useful for the society, while the DeSci model could actually be very useful in that regard. So in actually achieving something real that can be useful in the real world for the people and for the society itself.
I have a question, Filippo, if you don't mind, would you recommend this to like one of your peers, or have you recommended DeSci funding to one of your peers before?
Yeah, actually now I'm having conversation sometimes with colleagues, and I tell them to give it a look if they have some ideas that they think would be something that can, for example, in some years reach the market. I tell them that, yeah, this is a new possibility. It's something that they should definitely look into. It's something new. And most of the time they're actually very excited about the idea because it's not really that the people are not really aware that this is a possibility, especially among researchers. So they get quite happy and excited when they hear about this, at least from me. This is the experience I've been so far.
Amazing. That's so good to hear. I think I sometimes forget how few people are aware of like DeSci even existing. And I'm always really excited for like a future, like when more people know that it's even just like something on the table, an option like at their disposal. I'm really excited for that. But yeah, I'll hand it back to you, Tom. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Of course. Guys, this space is great in my opinion, and we're learning a lot of cool things and a lot of great ideas and opinions from everyone here. Now, something that's actually quite recent. So DeSci has been out, well, I don't want to say for a while. In crypto, it is kind of for a while because, 1 week it basically means it's like 1 year in Web3. But recently, there's been some concerns from the DeSci community. And people mentioned that, DeSci is vaporware. DeSci doesn't really work. We're here to prove that these statements are incorrect and DeSci actually works. And DeSci is here to prove the real world impact of the researchers that they're working on. So I wanted to get your opinion, Albert, Ella, Dan, Morgan, on this statement. What do you think needs to change? Is this statement actually true, that DeSci is vaporware? Is it not? In my opinion, obviously, it's not, and we're here to prove it. But what's your take on this?
I mean, I would just quickly reinforce my earlier point of like, it's about managing expectations at the end of the day. If you are coming into a space to get rich overnight, well, yeah, newsflash, that's not the reality. That's not what we're working with. And I think the reason people have come to expect that is, well, there's many reasons, but partially because crypto has enabled that, because a lot of the technology and a lot of the tokens that have been distributed are in fact vaporware, or there isn't a real world grounding to them, and therefore they have this potential for exponential growth. But what does exponential growth inevitably lead to? Well, it leads to a bubble which eventually bursts, because the growth of the market and the interest and the excitement and the token price does not reflect the real world value that's being created or collected by the protocol, etc., etc. So what eventually happens is that whole thing just collapses. And yeah, we might have still a few more cycles of this being, a lucrative investment opportunity, and think something that people think is like, why wouldn't you? And I don't blame you, like, not investment advice, but also if I could get rich overnight, like, I absolutely would love to do that. But that is not what we're here to do. And I think a lot of the criticism that's come into DeSci have been from these types of people. So if you're not those type of people, great, just ignore them. You know better anyway. And if you are those types of people, well, have a real think about why you're in this. And if it is just to get rich quick, then you're probably going to be disappointed. But if it's to build something that has long-term sustainable value and a real impact on the world, then welcome to the club.
Yeah, I mean, I think critics, skeptics, haters, peer reviewers, bullshit callers, like, they definitely serve a purpose. And like, all I'll say is that we're out here, we're building, we're sharing data, we're, real people with real reputations, trying to do our best in building in public. And, we're just trying to do our part.
Also, just one thing to remember, by the end of the day, DeSci being criticized, everything gets criticized in crypto. And you can see that in the way, like, for example, Ethereum has been criticized, despite being the most successful blockchain out of all blockchain, except, Bitcoin is separate. Let's call it just the most successful smart contract blockchain. But despite that, despite securing, I think it's like $200 billion worth of funds, and having done that consistently over 10 years with minimum downtime, it's still being criticized despite huge institutional banks actively adopting it and using it. It's still being criticized. So I think criticism in crypto or criticism in general, is super important for an ecosystem to improve. But criticism in crypto should also be taken with a big grain of salt, because it's not always like the most constructive. And there are teams everywhere, working super hard to make things work. But given that, as Morgan said, we are part of this macro cycle of crypto that spans over probably 10 to 20 years, there will always be these ups and downs, which causes all of these emotions and so on.
Yeah, I kind of like reiterate what's been said already. I think this is something I think we could all speak about for hours on end. It's something I think I, in my personal life, have spent a lot of time thinking about, and also in my professional life, it's something we think about. And I think any like criticism is par for the course. And I think it's good. I think anytime, we're asking people for money or to put money into something, that, there is a duty of care there that I believe in. I think sometimes in crypto that duty of care is not enforced, but I think that is the, morality standard that we exist in. And I think for me, what I've seen recently, as well as, people who come in to like churn and earn money quickly, like, their criticism, I think, doesn't hit me that deep, because I it's a behavior that I don't want to incentivize. If they don't like the DeSci ecosystem, they can move on. Like, I don't, if that's what you're here for, I would rather you just go, this was a shit experience, and move on. I think the criticism for me, somewhat, that I've seen recently, which I think hits a little bit more closely, is like from, I think, people who are either in the ecosystem or have been in the ecosystem, and they kind of are going, okay, what's this next phase of DeSci? And I think that's really where I'm seeing is like, I've been in DeSci now for 2 years, and I think we're at this crux moment. I think it was led by the DeSci wave, or the boom, or whatever you call it, towards the end of the year, where there was like, obviously an influx of money, there was an influx of attention, and there's also an influx of people who were interested in DeSci. And so like we had this moment where we like sort of almost like I think have outgrown our old pair of boots and we've moved into this new set of boots, and it's like all of a sudden there's like 101 places that we should be going, that we want to go, and it's now figuring out like a triage of like what the sort of things that we can tick off that will help the most. And I think one of the big things that we've seen is now like I mean, look, when I started Molecule, I think I started Molecule and that like only like 4 or 5 projects had been funded, and like I know that like our biotech team, like trying to have conversations with like traditional researchers or academia, like, you know, they were almost being laughed out the room in terms of like people were just like, I'm not interested in dealing with crypto and with this. I was actually having a conversation about this with someone earlier today. And then of course you get positive proof points. We've had researchers, we've had universities that have like embraced the model, had success from it, like researchers that are, you know, money lands in the bank account, they are able to buy their reagents, they're able to get in the lab, they're able to do the research. And I'm of course only speaking through the lens of, I guess, funding for research. DeSci is a lot broader than that. And then we've had now all of a sudden we have like a bigger appetite from institutions and researchers who are like, okay, cool, we've seen these proof points, but we're at this point where we're like now lagging on, I think, data sort of transparency is like I think the next thing that we're trying to fix, the next problem we're trying to unpack, and like, okay, cool, like what are the reporting lines now that someone's put money into a project? Like how do we ensure like a gold standard and a ecosystem standard for like what happens next? So this is an interesting, I think it's something we're looking at Molecule a lot. It's something, you know, we're thinking about a lot. I think growing pains are okay and they're natural. I think it's important to listen to people criticizing. It's also important to choose who you're listening to when they criticize you. And I think, yeah, one of the things I always say as well is like DeSci is inherently an experiment. We are currently in an experiment. You know what I mean? And I think that takes, you got to keep iterating and you got to try shit and it's got to fail and then you got to refigure yourself out. Like it's like being in the lab, you know what I mean? But I do think the most important thing as well is like I'm about to actually sound so hippie here, but I was like, be a good person, be accountable to people, you know, move through the space with a set of morals. And I think that's really what matters. And I think, you know, I wouldn't be in DeSci if I didn't feel like that was happening as much as it could be. So yeah, maybe a little bit more of a philosophical take. Yeah, I think all of it, like, yeah, it's fair and we move and we will continue to build and fix and build and fix.
Absolutely. Oh, Morgan, I thought you wanted to say something.
No, I just said, you tell them, sister.
Thanks, Morgan. I'll see you in London.
Love it, guys. Yeah, at the end of the day, haters gonna hate, and everything that you've all said resonates with me. But I definitely want to echo what Morgan was saying at the beginning, and just use Bitcoin as an example. You know, Bitcoin was not created in the Satoshi's manifesto. It was not created to make people rich. It was to change the world. It was to change how people perceive financial markets. And look at Bitcoin, obviously now, and DeSci is not here to make people rich. DeSci is here to change the world, to change how people perceive science. And I'm here for it. So guys in the audience, because we do want to have a few questions from the community. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I'll get you here on stage. And in the meantime, I've got one final question that I want to ask you guys. Obviously, if you'd like to share some of your final thoughts, but the question that, you know, I've got in my mind is, what can we all do to push DeSci forward? What do you think is key to push DeSci forward? What can we all do? All of us working on DeSci, being in the community. Morgan, maybe you'd like to start.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking. I mean, I have a lot of answers. I'm trying to think of the one, but maybe I'll just brain dump a little bit, and then if I say anything that resonates, someone can pull on that thread. I think, as Ella said, accountability is a huge part, and that's something that, you know, we are taking definitely more seriously, and just the communications aspect of what we do. It's very easy for us to get bogged down in the weeds building stuff that we know is going to be valuable, or that we hope is going to have an impact on our financial situation and all of these things. But you know, to be able to communicate that, to be able to keep people engaged, to be able to maintain a strong community in the midst of all of this is really important. And yeah, it's something we've done well at certain times and done not so well at other times. But now we're really happy to have you, Tom, and someone whose very job it is to hold us accountable and kind of be that mediator between us and the community, and making sure that we're not only doing the right things, but communicating them, making sure that everybody knows what we're doing and can maintain that belief that this is going to be something huge for.
Love it. Thank you so much, Morgan. Ella, Albert, any final thoughts or answer to that question? What can we do to push DeSci forward? Yes, Albert?
I think it's just being, in general, when an ecosystem is very small like this, it just makes sense to have cross collaboration across all protocols. And one interesting observation that I've noticed is that there is intra-DeSci competition, which makes zero sense at this stage of an ecosystem's development. I think we all just need to have a general more like positive attitude towards each other's projects, but still keep each other accountable and make sure that we deliver on our promises as good as we can, or at least if we don't manage to, at least explicitly say that, hey, we failed, guys. But this is what we learned. But I see Martin is here as well. If you want to speak on that topic as well, Martin, or if you have any question.
Hello. No, it was more of a question to put in perspective, like the DeSci model and the traditional one. Like before, you were saying that it took you, I don't know, maybe 3 to 6 months to get the funding, and in only 2 months you got to have already like results that are super promising. And so this was allowed by DeSci, or in the traditional model, how much time would have it taken to do all this?
Well, I can maybe answer that one. It depends what you're applying for, right? But if you're applying for a grant, it's like months of preparation for the grant itself. And then you basically have months of delay time. So colleagues of ours, or people that we were to be collaborating with this year, we wanted to work on them with a project that kind of intersected on some of the product stuff that we've been building. And, they're applying for a grant. They couldn't start until they get the funds, and they won't find out if they get the funds for another 9 months, even though they submitted their grant application in January, I believe. So we weren't able to make that collaboration work just yet, and we may never in the future, right? Because that delay period is just so long, and that's before they can even start doing anything, right? Because they won't even have the funds yet. So once they get the funds, how long it will take, is ultimately up to them and the team to execute. But just in general, like grant applications take a hell of a long time because there is this kind of money being given without as many expectations. There's a lot more checks and balances for ensuring that they're spending it in the right way. And the people that are providing the funds to these grants, sometimes it's philanthropists, many times it's governments, also have their checks and balances. They also want to know that these funds are being used and creating impact. So that means that maybe you're not expecting to develop IP, but it means that the top of the funnel is it just takes much, much longer. And also you have a much higher level of competition. So whereas, ValleyDAO maybe has had a few hundred applications in the time that we've been around, many of these grants will post, let's say, 20 calls per year or even more, and each of those will have like several thousand people apply to those grants. So you can imagine why they take these 9-month cycles. And maybe this is something that we can think about in DeSci as well. Like, do we actually want to grow so big? Because possibly we just end up recreating this heavy bureaucracy and long kind of delay times. But yeah, that's just a kind of question to stew on for the next one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Martin. Thank you for the question. And Ella, Filippo, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Nope. Thanks for hosting.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ella.
Yeah, thanks a lot for hosting and for giving me the possibility of sharing some of the insights of the Hempy Project.
Of course, that's what we're here to do, really. At this point, we're here to share the research outputs, everything that's happening, to communicate with the community, to communicate with people that helped fund Hempy Research Project. So, guys, that pretty much wraps up our first Proof of DeSci episode. Huge thank you to Filippo, Ella, Morgan, Albert, Dan, who's not here with us anymore. Hempy's breakthrough has been a great example of what's possible in DeSci and how we can rethink how DeSci and science gets funded. And guys, if you enjoyed this conversation, stay connected with ValleyDAO. Go and follow Ella, go and follow Molecule, go follow Hempy Project, go follow Albert, Morgan, Dan, and obviously ValleyDAO for more research updates and upcoming episodes. Guys, until next time, and let's keep proving that DeSci works. Thank you so much for being with us.